Welcome to the HealthLaw HotSpot. HealthLaw HotSpot is a podcast for physicians and health professionals that covers the legal issues and trends that affect the healthcare industry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the HealthLaw HotSpot. I'm Erica Adler, shareholder and leader of the healthcare practice at Retzel and Andrus. Today, Christina Kuda, part of our healthcare practice, is with me, and we're going to talk about a topic that comes up fairly often. This has to do with physicians believing that they can self-prescribe or prescribe to family and friends, and what some of the repercussions are when they get caught doing just that. So I'm going to turn it over to Christina, and she's going to kind of fill us in on what doctors can and cannot do.
Sure. Thanks, Erica. So this has actually come up recently in the last couple of months, a few times in our practice related to this topic. So if you're a physician or other healthcare provider, can you self-treat, self-prescribe, or treat or prescribe to family and friends? So the answer is a great lawyer answer, which is it kind of depends. So one issue is state law. A lot of states and licensing regulations, licensing statutes for providers have specific rules or guidance about this topic. And many states don't love the idea of physicians treating themselves or prescribing themselves or being in a position to treat or prescribe to family and friends unless they're truly patients of the physician and treated the exact same way that a physician might treat me if I walked into their door and wasn't a family member or wasn't any sort of friend or had any relationship with the doctor. So you've always got to look at state laws first and what your licensing regulations might be. There's also some guidance from some medical societies, boards, and the American Medical Association. The AMA has a specific ethical guidance document that discusses this, and they just don't love it. They really think it could be an issue if you are going to try to prescribe for yourself or treat yourself or treat family and friends. And what they're concerned about, and what a lot of these guidance documents and position statements from societies focus on, is the judgment issue. Can you really have good medical judgment and provide services within the standard of care if you're treating a family or friend of yours? So for example, if someone has a condition and maybe the standard of care, and if they were someone you didn't know, would have you examining maybe a sensitive body part or asking questions that are sensitive in nature, you may not feel comfortable asking those questions or doing that examination at a family member or a friend, okay? There also may be an expectation of that family member or friend that they're not going to be treated just like another patient. So they may be offended if you keep a medical record or you treat them in a more business-like professional manner when they're just calling and saying, hey, I've got a sore throat, can you write me a Z-Pak or something like that? So there's expectations on both sides may not be appropriate. The other issue is, if family and friends, I know in my experience, and I'm guilty of it, I have family members that are physicians, and historically, I've called them when I know I've got a condition that could just use a prescription and said, hey, can you write me a prescription? And sometimes they do, a lot of times they don't for different reasons, but all those occasions, I've asked them outside the course of their practice or their employment. So I've called them on the phone at 7 p.m. after hours to ask them a question or ask them for help. So if you are a physician and you're going to treat a family member or friend as not part of your regular practice, you're required to keep a medical record. You're required to keep an actual record of the treatment you provided. Where do you store that? If they're not a patient of your practice, you can't use the practice EMR. Most physicians don't have their own, personal EMR. Do you write down the notes? Where do you store the notes? How is that HIPAA protected? How can those notes be verified? So there's a lot of different considerations when you're prescribing, and we'll talk a little bit more about the prescribing rules in a minute, but even just treating family and friends and providing medical advice. And even if your state licensing body doesn't strictly prohibit it, a lot of them, it is frowned upon. I know here in Illinois, it is extraordinarily frowned upon by the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, even though there is no actual law that says you cannot treat a family member or you can't treat yourself. If you do it and IDFPR finds out about it, they will follow up on it and you will be questioned. And it can form a disciplinary action against your license. So it's very important that if you're going to do this, that you go into it understanding all the potential cons and what all the specific rules are.
Right. So ethical issues aside, if you do keep appropriate medical records, I think it's probably more likely that you'll be able to fight off a challenge, because ethical concerns are not the same as some of the legal issues created by failure to have a medical record. But that doesn't make it okay. But if you're still plan to do it and you want to limit risk, one of the things I understand, and when we get these kinds of calls, usually you'll get an investigator sending you, a complaint or calling you or whatever about this particular issue. What would be the next steps for a doctor who's been contacted about this? And I guess, how would they find out is also a pretty valid question. How do they typically find out, and what should they do if they are contacted?
Okay, so how licensing bodies find out that this is occurring is a couple of different ways. Licensing bodies have the authority, like for prescriptions, to look at your prescription status and see what you've been prescribing. Like Illinois has a prescription monitoring program for controlled substances. They can look in the database. So if they have a reason to be alerted, or if they're just doing spot searching, they can find out what you're prescribing as a physician. Also, sometimes people make complaints. You have a family member, you have a friend, right? And then there's some kind of dust up. Your friend gets mad at you and they're thinking, you know what? A year ago when I had that sore throat and I thought it was strep, and my friend doctor said, yeah, it's strep, I'm going to give you this antibiotic. It turns out it wasn't strep and it didn't treat it. And I'm mad about it. They shouldn't have done that. That was bad. And they make a complaint. And it seems like far-fetched that wouldn't happen. But you and I have seen this a lot of times over our career. People get mad for a lot of reasons and they complain for a lot of reasons. Even if you think it's odd or unusual or unlikely, it happens. So once licensing boards are alerted to something, they generally have a duty to investigate further, which means contacting the physician. So if a physician gets contacted by a licensing authority related to this issue, it's really important to start gathering information. Like you mentioned, if you treat a family member or friend, but you treat them like you treat any other patient, they see you in your practice, you work within the standard of care, you do the appropriate examinations, you keep appropriate medical records, and you do everything you would do the same as if a patient just walked off the street who you didn't know, you likely can justify that. But unfortunately, that's often what not happens. Usually physicians kind of truncate their process when it's a family or friend, and family and friends have that expectation. So it's generally the rarer occurrence that family and friends are treated just like patients, but that is a way to do it and have more of a justification for that relationship.
Right. So one of the first things I know we recommend when an investigation is started and before you've responded to the inquiries, in addition to gathering what you have, which, as you mentioned, is very little, we usually like to start fixing the situation as much as we can, which usually involves letting a doctor know what they obviously didn't know, which are the rules, right? So we'll often recommend that physicians do some continuing education on these ethical issues and self-prescribing. Every physician should be doing that and should be aware that they shouldn't be, necessarily prescribing for themselves and for family members. But just to kind of back that up, one of the first things we recommend is continuing education. And from my understanding, that will make a difference. Am I correct that they do like to see that whatever it is they're about to be accused of, that they immediately are trying to resolve the issue?
Absolutely. So my experience in working with licensing authorities over the years is they do understand that sometimes physicians or other providers do things because they just didn't know. They didn't think it was going to be an issue. It wasn't harmful or fraud or, any purposeful intent. So because of that, like you said, we always try to say, hey, if you didn't understand these rules, these are the rules, and you should now take some education. You should show to the licensing authority that you are taking this seriously. you are getting education, you're documenting that education, you are going to legitimate sources of continuing medical education to make sure that you understand the rules and that the ethical considerations, and that moving forward, you are going to be and will be absolutely compliant with that. That shows the licensing authority that you care about what happened, you're taking it seriously, you care about your license, you want to practice in an appropriate manner. Just saying, well, I think they're wrong and there's no law against it, so what's the problem, isn't going to cut it with a licensing authority. They have a lot of wiggle room that isn't just related to what a law says or doesn't say. They can take into account ethical considerations as well, and just the norms of practice. So it's really important that you show that you're sorry and that you are going to fix it and are fixing it moving forward, particularly with prescribing. There are a lot of rules with prescribing. A provider never should self-prescribe a controlled substance for themselves. It shouldn't happen. We've seen it happen, and we've seen providers, have some serious consequences for that, including loss of employment. So controlled substances are out of bounds. A physician wanting to prescribe themselves an antibiotic should be very limited circumstances. An emergency, there's no other available option. It's hard to support that because we generally all live in a place where you could go to an ER, you could go to an urgent care, right? Physicians know other physicians. They can go to someone and say, check out my symptoms. This is what I think I have. So it's got to be in a pretty limited circumstance. With family and friends, generally, if you're going to prescribe a controlled substance to a family or friend, you need to do it exactly how you would do it for any other patient. Same workup, records, proper examination, only treat within the scope of your practice. If you are a dermatologist and you believe that one of your friends is having some anxiety, like let's say they're going to fly and they hate to fly, and you want to prescribe them an anti-anxiety medication that might be a controlled substance, I wouldn't do it, because that's not your scope of practice, really. I mean, yeah, you went to medical school and it's not illegal for you to prescribe that, but it's generally not within your scope of practice. You also need to check state laws. Some state laws will say you can't prescribe to certain family or friends, or you have to have certain things in place to do that. So make sure you understand what your state laws say as well. The DEA is sort of the federal enforcement body of controlled substances, although many states have their own controlled substances laws. They actually don't specifically prohibit self-prescribing or prescribing to family and friends, but they do say that all prescriptions must be issued for a legitimate purpose and be medically necessary and given in the usual in the usual course of a provider's practice. So if you're just writing your friend a script for her anxiety medication for the airplane, calling it into Walgreens because she called you and asked, that's not in the usual course of business, practice, etc. Also, the DEA specifically says you have to meet all state laws related to prescriptions. So even if the DEA says it's okay under these circumstances, if your state says it's not, or your state requires different circumstances, you've just broken federal law because you've not met the state legal requirements. So really something important to keep in mind.
Right. And I think this comes up often enough that I kind of want to put out there, don't self-prescribe and don't prescribe to family and friends as a general rule. If there's going to be an exception, think long and hard about it, document it, take all necessary steps. A lot of times doctors just feel, this is something that they're entitled to do, something that they expect to be able to do. I hear about doctors self-prescribing all kinds of things. You've got, semaglutide type shots that they're giving themselves. Definitely anxiety medications are a big self-prescribing thing. And then, my wife couldn't sleep, so I helped prescribe this, etc. So it is so common. And yes, your chances of getting in trouble, given how many people do it, is probably minimal, but the repercussions can be quite significant. You mentioned loss of employment, but we have also seen licensure issues. We have seen DEA investigations that go on for a couple of years, really affect a doctor's ability to continue working, to take a new job, and can potentially impair the license in the state as well. So the repercussions just outweigh greatly the benefit of the quick, prescription. And not only that, but you can still prescribe as long as you just do the document. So, I think this is really an education item, and I'm kind of thinking it that way. So hopefully everybody listening to this who's a doctor will become aware, or a nurse practitioner who prescribes as well, or a PA who prescribes, that these are the rules. If you have friends or family that prescribe, or you've asked to prescribe for you, make sure you have a conversation with them about this as well. Because I think we really just want to spread the word so we see fewer of these kinds of cases coming, past us, where, we feel really terrible for these physicians. And I would guarantee 90% of the time, at least they tell us, they really didn't know they were doing anything wrong. So.
Yeah. And, I've talked to clients too over the years, physicians, on a few occasions who have said, well, I feel bad. It's a family member. I know they just have like a UTI and this will fix it for them. And they've had it before. And it's, there's low risk anything's going to go wrong. And I have told them, just blame it on me. Just say, you know what, I would love to do it, but my lawyer has said, absolutely, I'm not allowed to do it. So, I think that can be awkward, and you do feel badly. I mean, and even in the legal field, I have people ask me all the time for legal advice on topics. I don't work in that field, so I can't answer the question. I feel bad. It's not often legal. So I think you sort of just, need to take that approach and just tell them, I'd love to help you and I get it, but maybe I can help you find a physician who can help you, or something like that.
Right. And one last thing, don't forget telemedicine. I mean, a lot of times where I might ask a friend who's a doctor, I can easily go online to, Teladoc, or there's special telemedicine services for everything from UTIs to, other type of issues. You can get prescribed immediately just by having a texting interaction or a video interaction. It's just as fast as asking your friend or family member, and it's much safer for everyone. So, and it's not expensive either. So, I think today, compared to 5 years ago, there's a lot of solutions out there, and we're just kind of urging everyone to be aware of this and to find alternative solutions, I think, right?
Absolutely. Better be safe on the front end than have troubles on the back end.
Right. All right. Any final words on this?
No, just, again, if you have questions about it, if you wonder what you're doing, you talk to knowledgeable healthcare counsel. You could even call your licensing board and ask them. I wouldn't give me your name, but do it anonymously and say, hey, I'm just curious. What are the rules on this? But I think what you said is spot on. I think it should be the rule that you're not self-prescribing and you're not treating family and friends. And there should be only limited exceptions.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's the HealthLaw HotSpot for this week. You can catch more of our session at ralaw.com. You can also email us with any questions. You can reach Christina at ckuda@ralaw.com. And you can reach me at eadler@ralaw.com. We welcome any questions that you may have about this podcast or any other topics that we've covered. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
The Retzel HealthLaw HotSpot is made available by the firm and its attorneys for educational purposes and to provide general information, not to provide specific legal advice. Use of the Retzel HealthLaw HotSpot does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and the firm or any of its attorneys. The Retzel HealthLaw HotSpot should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice, and you should contact an attorney in your state about any legal needs or questions you may have.